Hi, welcome back to another episode of Retire Right with Epstein White. As always, I'm Brad White.
I'm David Epstein.
And Dave, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm feeling good, brother. Ready to get this thing going.
You know, nothing excites us more than talking about financial planning on a weekend, right? I don't know if that says a little bit more about us than it needs to, but you know what?
That's who we are.
We love this stuff, and our mission is to make sure that not only do you love this stuff, but that you can walk away from today's episode and really apply something that you learned to really arm you with just, again, the chances of a more successful retirement for you. And so today we're going to start off with our retirement alert. And this week's alert is the fact that the timing of what the market does actually affects you now. That's right, the market timing before did not, but we're going to explain what we mean when we say that now, all of a sudden, it does affect you. And as every week, what we try to do is answer one of your own viewer questions. This week, a viewer asked, should I be investing in gold? So we're going to tackle that viewer question today as well.
You know, other topics we're going to cover today, which are super important, is having a will, or even better yet, maybe having a trust. And which one should you have? And certainly, a lot of people out there looking for mutual funds to purchase and invest in. And a lot of people chase that famous 5-star rating by Morningstar. Is that the best measure of what I should be looking for? Is this 5-star rating? Well, let's get this show started today. We've got a lot of great information to share with you all.
Well, you know, Dave, I think we're all chasing stars in one way, shape, or form or other, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, but when it comes to financial planning and how you choose your investments, it turns out, depending on which stars you chase, might actually be costing you in the way of returns.
Yeah, absolutely, Bradley.
Seems kind of weird to think, huh?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what a lot of people do, Brad, is choose that star rating by Morningstar.
That would be the star we're referring to.
Figuring that if I just choose that 5-star fund each and every year, I'm going to be so far ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about 5-star ratings or chasing stars, what the heck are we talking about? Now, please remember what a mutual fund is in general. Certainly, if you listen to our radio show each week and if you've seen previous episodes of this show, you know we talk a lot about mutual funds because it's the most common investment that the average American has. And if you're watching this, you probably have some mutual funds right now. And one mutual fund is going to have maybe 100 stocks inside of it, maybe 100 bonds. Just depends on what category of mutual fund you have. The whole point, though, is that you have decided you don't want to pick and choose your own stocks or bonds. You're willing to pay a fee to a team of money managers, portfolio managers who run that mutual fund in hopes that they're picking and choosing good stocks, that they're picking and choosing good bonds, and that net of their fees, they're beating basically what you could be doing without having to pay those fees. So back in 2012, from a study of U.S. News, they showed that only about, well, actually, let me say that 73% of active U.S. stock mutual funds were not even beating the S&P 500, Dave.
Yeah.
Right? So that's been an issue in its own right.
That's very telling, and it's very difficult for these money managers to pick not only the stocks and bonds that make up their fund and those expenses that they're incurring there, and for doing that, Bradley, but the index, which is so much more efficient to own, it's hard for these money managers, active managers, it's hard for them to beat their index.
Yeah.
And so...
well, you know, one of the things that certainly tells us is that, yeah, that may be a problem in its own right, and it is, but clearly of the 9,000 or 10,000 mutual funds that exist, some have a lot better records than others, right? So that's certainly kind of where we want to take this. Now, Morningstar, well, I'll say it this way again. You probably don't want to do a ton of research on evaluate the careers and the professions of all these money managers, so you really would like it if someone could just tell you which are the good funds and which are the bad funds. And Morningstar is kind of the country's leading analytical firm that does this. That is one of their main jobs, is to do all this research. Now, Morningstar, back in 1985, started to create this 5-star rating system. So from 1 stars, kind of worst, all the way up till 5 stars, the best. Now, they have a whole bunch of criteria on this, and I just want to read off a little bit of this, Dave, which is that Morningstar is assigning a 1-star rating to about 10% of the funds it evaluates, 22.5% of the funds get a 2-star rating, 35% of the funds get a 3-star rating, 22.5% get a 4-star rating, and only 10% get a 5-star rating. So that certainly kind of leads you to believe, okay, if I'm just following this firm and that's their main job, and only 10% of the top performers, then if I could just stick to 5-star funds, then I've got to be ahead of the game, right? I got to be doing
Absolutely,
better.
absolutely.
Well, if you saw the title of the segment, you know, the chasing stars could lead to underperformance. Yeah, you might be kind of getting an idea of where we're going to head with this. Here's the interesting thing about how Morningstar develops its rating system, right? How are they deciding what is a 1-star fund or a 5-star fund? There is a lot of criteria, but just for timing on the show, what's important is that one of the main criteria that they're using is past performance. So they're looking at the last 3, 5, and 10-year periods of time of performance to see what's already happened, and if the performance is good, they get a better rating. The problem is no mutual fund is going to be the best forever, Dave, right? There's no way that it's going to happen, which means if something's already had some great years, you're basically buying it high, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
kind of intuitive. And if you're going to start to sell 3 or 2-star funds or something to that effect, it's kind of this nonstop revolving door where you're selling something after it didn't do well and you're buying something after it did high, okay?
Right.
Which is intuitively, once again, kind of the last thing you'd want to do. Logically, the last thing you want to do. And so what's interesting is Morningstar themselves did the study back in 2010. And Dave, I remember when the study came out, the person at Morningstar that did the study, Morningstar didn't like the study too much because the
Is he still there?
Yeah, I don't
she?
think. Yeah, I got to be honest, probably not.
Yeah.
And then basically, here's the reason why, folks. This study in 2010 that Morningstar themselves did found that if a person had just bought a fund and stuck with it from the year 2000 through the year 2010, they would have done on average 1.5% per year better than if they just constantly bought 5-star funds.
Right. So there's a message there, folks, and it's a really important message. And if you're wanting to go alone, go this alone and do this yourself, it's no easy thing. And you really do need guidance if this is you and you're wanting to not go it alone. And it even becomes even more imperative and important as you get into retirement. And boy, that just doesn't speak to about Bradley being in the right locations. You know, we're just talking about ratings, but are you in the right locations when the market does well, or in the wrong locations when the market does poorly? So,
and I think you spoke to that perfectly. Most people realize you can't go at this alone. And even for those of you that thought that, hey, just sticking to some 5-star funds means I can go at it alone, well, that's why this was a retirement myth, and that's why this was the segment of choice for us today. How do you know if you have the right funds? How do you know if the funds you chose that used to be good are no longer the best funds? Right now is as good as time as ever and as important as time as ever to get a second opinion, a portfolio review. And so if you're looking close to getting to retirement, right, if you just want a portfolio review for any and all of your accounts, give our firm a call, come to our website. We'll be happy to do that for you.
You made it. Years of hard work, investing, planning, and now you're here. The long-awaited reward you spent a lifetime looking forward to. But what now? After years of growing a nest egg, now you want to manage it. Use it to fund your dreams. Make sure it lasts as long as you need it. And make sure it leaves a legacy for those you love. So what do? Wall Street continues to be uncertain, and many conservative options have all but dropped through the floor. How do you maintain opportunities for growth without risking what you can't afford to lose? That's where we come in. We are financial professionals. From investments and insurance products to tax reduction strategies, estate planning solutions, and guaranteed retirement income you cannot outlive. You've worked a lifetime to get here. Let us help you enjoy it to the fullest. For a special free guide entitled 10 Things to Know About Retirement Income, simply contact us today.
Well, as you know by now, each and every week, one of our favorite things to do is to go through a list of questions that you, the audience, has either called in or has emailed us or gone to the website. We love hearing from you. We want to know what's on your mind and what we can help with. This week, the question is none other than, should I invest in gold?
yeah,
Right.
we hear that a little bit, Bradley.
We hear, should I invest in gold? I don't know, maybe more often than anything else. Or I guess maybe the way to start this is that there seems to be some infatuation with gold as an investment, maybe more than anything else that we hear. And I can't necessarily pinpoint the exact reason why, but a lot of times if there's kind of this preconceived notion of investing on something, unfortunately that means it may not be factually based, or even worse, it might be emotionally based. So I want to get into the real facts of gold today more than anything else, so we can kind of arm you with the information. Because once again, as always, we don't have a crystal ball. I certainly couldn't sit here and tell you today that gold is going to do well or is going to do poorly in comparison to anything else in the future. But just if nothing else, let's start to give you a little bit of the facts since we get these questions kind of all the time. One of the things that's really important to remember about gold is the unfortunate truth that there's really not a real tangible intrinsic value that we can point and put our fingers on. As an example, if we're going to invest in something like stocks, there's something fundamentally there that we can measure, that we can try to value, and therefore base our opinion on really, is it a good investment or how it should be valued, right? When we invest in a stock, we are going to pay for the future earnings growth, the current and the future expected earnings growth, right? The profitability of that company. We're also going to invest in value and maybe things like dividends that the company is going to pay us, give us profits, as well as the future dividends or dividends growth along the way, right? So something we can wrap our heads around and touch. Does that mean stocks are great necessarily? No. Does that mean that we certainly know what stocks are going to be valued in the short term despite all those things that we might be able to see or touch?
No.
No, unfortunately, right, that's not the reality. But at least it gives us a measure if something's expensive or cheap or something that we can track over time. And gold doesn't pay any dividends. It's not a company that has any earnings. So right off the bat, some of this infatuation, I think this just comes from the fact that it's really impossible to kind of value other than just this general supply and demand that may exist. And we came off the gold standard a long time ago, so even that is something that's really hard for us to kind of pinpoint.
Well, when volatility comes and
Perfectly, yeah.
and interest rates start to spike up, boy, the talking heads on buying gold and that you need to have some and maybe you need to have a lot start to really become common, and so you just need to be careful there. I could tell an old story, not too long ago, maybe 8-9 years ago, yes, when everything was falling around us, back in 08, 07. And it was hard to stay the course. If I take you back to that time period, what was happening in the market. And there was a pastor friend of mine that was convinced that he needed to put all his money in gold because everything was coming to an end, Bradley. Lehman Brothers, Wachovia, Bear Stearns, all disappeared. AIG getting a big bailout and houses plummeting in value. And boy, and it was like the only place to put your money was gold. And quite frankly, it didn't work out so well for my pastor friend. And gold has really done nothing since that period. And the stock market is up 260+%. And gosh, you got to be careful there, Bradley, in the infatuation of that yellow metal. And
well, let's take that back even further, right? What's the actual proof in the pudding here a little bit? And I went back and looked at this, Dave, and if you go back to 1987, the price of gold was around $400 an ounce, okay? So we did this research a few weeks ago. Gold changes every day, but gold was hovering a little bit lower than $1,300 an ounce in 2017 when we were looking at this. So over that 30-year period of time, that's like getting a 3.53% annualized rate of return over a 30-year period of time, which after inflation over that 30 years means you pretty much walked away with a negative real return. Now, if something's going to make 2 or 3% over a long period of time, Dave, and it's incredibly safe, that's okay. That is what it is. You made a conscious choice. But gold, during that 30-year stretch, has actually been more volatile than stocks have been. So look, again, we can't ever predict the future, but the reality is over a 30-year stretch, we've been able to track something that is riskier and more volatile in the short term and has produced very anemic returns. It's impossible to value fundamentally. A lot of times if a very global kind of worldwide scare or a lot of fear is created, that can cause gold to go up. Even that I would caution you on because if something really traumatic or impossible kind of to our economy ever happens, I personally would feel more comfortable buying things like land, right, as kind of a backbone if I thought the paper currency was going to go under necessarily than gold. We're getting a little opinion based there, but the reality and the facts are be very careful in this whole concept of investing in gold because the reality is it's very hard to predict. It's very volatile. The returns haven't been there. So there's a lot of investments like this that are really scary or maybe hard to understand. That's why you just need to give our firm a call. Take a look at the number below and the website, and whatever question you have, please go ahead and ask it, and next week we'll pick a great one and we'll go ahead and answer it then. All right, and let's get ready for this week's Retirement Alert. This week's alert is all about teaching you that now the timing of the stock market returns for the first time in your entire life actually matters. Now, when I say that, you might be thinking a couple of things right off of the bat. Some of you may be thinking, oh my gosh, now the timing of the returns matters. How so? Some of you might also just be thinking, well, wait a minute, I just kind of figured that this entire time, or my whole life, the timing of the stock market and its returns would have to matter, right? So why all of a sudden is something different, right? So certainly a lot of different ways that we can go with this. So let's teach you what we mean when we say this. Now, this week's alert is going to start off with the pop quiz. Yes, that's right. I'm sorry to do this to you, but we're going to start off with a pop quiz, and it's a pretty difficult one, so get ready. What is 1 times 2 times 3? All right, the answer is 6. Okay, so not terribly difficult. Now, second part of this quiz. What is 3 times 2 times 1? All right, the answer is still 6, isn't it? In other words, when we had the same numbers there as we were looking at some math, it didn't really matter what order those numbers happened in, right? We ended up getting to that number 6 as the answer either way. In other words, the timing of when those numbers happened pretty much didn't matter to us at all. Now, what a lot of people may not realize is for our entire lives before we retire, we're just saving and growing and investing our money. We're not ideally pulling from those retirement accounts. So the stock market's return, the order, the timing of which those returns happen does not matter to you whatsoever either for your entire lives. Now the question simply becomes, as we eventually get to retirement and as we eventually actually need to start pulling money from our accounts, does it still work the same way? Or for the first time ever, does the timing of which the stock market has its different returns for the first time actually matter for you? Right? In order to teach you this a little bit, let's go ahead and show our first visual up here behind me on the screen. Now, what you're going to see is a hypothetical starting value of somebody's retirement accounts of $500,000. So you'll see that highlighted right there. Somebody starting with $500,000. And what you'll see on the left-hand side of this screen here is just a period of years. And we just decided to choose the years 2000 through the years 2011. We're looking at the S&P 500 here. Really, basically, all we're trying to show you is what the stock market, in this case, the S&P 500, what its calendar year returns were each of those years from 2000 through 2011. It could be any numbers, but we're just looking at actual stock market returns now. Basically, what you're going to see, it was a pretty rough start, right, with the 2000, 2001, 2002 years, and it finished off okay those last few years. And you'll see that at the bottom, you ended up with $428,000, okay? So not a great 12-year period of time. You didn't get back to even. You finish with $428,000. On the right side of your screen, it's the same $500,000 starting value, and it's the exact same stock market returns. It is the same series of numbers for the S&P 500. All we did was flip-flop the order. That's it. This time we have a better start in the beginning and the really rough finish, as opposed to the first time, that really rough start with a better finish. Now take a look at that number at the very bottom of the right screen, and you once again finish with exactly the same amount of money, that pretty near $428,000 number. It's the same exact lesson we just learned on our pop quiz, right? Which is 3 times 2 times 1 is the same thing as 1 times 2 times 3. When the stock market has its different returns, some years are good, some years are bad. The order doesn't matter. We end up in the same spot. Now the proverbial question is, what happens when we physically need to start pulling money out of our accounts to live off of in retirement? Let's take a look at this next visual. And it's basically the same exact thing. You'll see in the middle there that we use that same $500,000 starting value. You'll see there those years, 2000 through 2011, on that left-hand side. You'll see this same exact stock market returns. Once again, pretty rough start in those early 2000s, finished off okay there those last few years. But this time we're going to show you pulling $20,000 out that first year, increasing it by 3% every year to adjust for inflation. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see you finish with only about $125,000. Once again, on the right-hand side, the only thing we did was flip-flop the order. It's the exact same stock market returns. This time, again, better start, worse finish, and this time you finish with $197,000. That's 37% more money. It was the same exact stock market, same period of time. You pulled out the same money. One person got unlucky on the left that the stock market had a bad start. One person got a little luckier on the right that it was a better start. The point being is, for the first time ever, the timing of the market matters, and you can't afford to go into retirement hoping to be lucky and avoid being unlucky. We have to put a plan together for how you're going to generate income, where you're going to generate from, and how you can keep yourself safe from this phenomenon known as the sequence of returns risk. Take a look at that number on our screen, visit our website. There's a lot of strategies out there that we can arm you with to help make sure this doesn't happen to you. Social Security is something that impacts almost all of our retirement plans, and it's incredibly complex to learn all of the rules, all the strategies, all the options, not to mention how it implicates your taxes or investments and everything else in your retirement plan. Here at Epstein White, we are experts in how to navigate through this difficult Social Security conversation, and we have an incredible team ready to help you on how to choose Social Security correctly. So take a look at the number below, come see our website, and we're looking forward to seeing you and helping you navigate through your Social Security decisions.
Hey, well, this segment all about wills and trusts, I think a really, really important segment, folks. You know, we put our heart and soul in building towards retirement and making sacrifices, saving, showing discipline, making good choices along the way, and building a moat around all that we do for retirement in the way of healthcare, making good healthcare decisions, the kind of health insurance that we want. Long-term care insurance, really important to be addressing those issues. Health insurance doesn't pay for long-term care. But ultimately, you know, one day when our life is over, how do we have all of what we've worked so hard for pass to those that we love and we care about? Or maybe it might even be causes that are near and dear to our heart, charitable plan giving. And so wills, certainly a good thing to have. A trust, I think, is something, if you own property, Bradley, you know, something, you know, you might want to really think stronger about having a trust, because there's something in the state of California, in fact, in most states, it's called probate. And that word just doesn't sound good at all.
No, and it's worse than it sounds in reality as far as what happens. Now, I don't want to get lost what you started off talking about, which is the broader issue here, which is just, we spend our whole lives building what we have. Whatever investments we have and properties we have, that's our hard work. And I know for most of us, myself certainly included, is I want to make sure that all of my hard work goes where I want it to go and to whom I want it to go to in the manner in which I want it to go.
Absolutely.
Someday, right? I would certainly like to keep lawyers' fees, court cost, the state of California or federal government's kind of hands out of the pockets of my hard work that should be going to my beneficiaries, whether that be my loved ones, children, other family members, or to your point, you know, charity or charities of your choice. So just the broader issue, I think that's really important. Now, what is a will? Okay, if you don't even have a basic will, that means the state of California is going to decide for you where all of your assets go. They don't really care what conversations you might have had with different family members, Dave. You might have made promises of, don't worry, you know, this is, you know, I'm going to give you this, but it doesn't matter.
Boy, the plan for the state of California has a plan for us, huh, Bradley, if we don't do this?
And maybe we won't touch that one on today's show too much as far as how much we might all like that plan coming from the state. We'll just kind of leave it at that.
Right.
So a will at the very least tell the courts where you want your assets to go and whom you want to go to. But the biggest issue here is that, yes, the courts still administer a will through the probate process. And probate is not a friendly thing. Here in Southern California, it's a very lengthy process right now. There's not as many probate judges as there used to be. It's taking something like, on average, 18 months, sometimes double that, just to administer your estate to your loved ones. Sometimes 10 to as much as 20% of everything in your estate is going to be lost completely to things like probate court fees and what the attorneys get. It's a public process, which means anybody and everybody can pay right now to the court system to find out every private detail of your estate. And let's say there was things like property that wanted to be left, Dave, and let's say there was multiple kids that were inheriting this. I can pick up the phone and start calling those kids and start to offer different deals, trying to buy them out of certain things, because again, probate's a public process. So I don't think anything we described is appealing.
No. And so we want to
So
shelter
a trust,
that.
right? A trust, ideally.
No, a trust avoids all what Bradley just described to you as something that's a painful process, delay, expense, public information, certainly a trust is something to strongly consider. And they're not all that expensive either. So I love, my own family has a trust.
Right.
I know your family has a trust. And it's an efficient way to protect our estate.
So what is a trust? Okay, a trust is just a private entity. That's it. You, or let's say you and your spouse, just create this thing. It's your trust. And now on non-retirement accounts, things like your home or things like, again, brokerage accounts that you have non-retirement investments, now you just simply have the trust own it. But guess what? It's basically like you own it, right? It's basically just like you jointly own something. There's almost no difference. You'll never really see or feel the difference. You can make any changes you want in the accounts over time. You can spend or save as much as you want in the accounts or the home over time. The basic difference now is, when we pass away, which we all do someday, everything will just be a completely private event from the estate planning attorney to your family. There will be no courts, no probates, no fees, no tax implications, nothing. Right, so if you're doing some basic estate planning, right, and if and obviously we're not attorneys, so let's make sure that we spell that out. We're very well versed in estate planning. We're here to teach you what you need to know. A qualified, specifically estate planning attorney, somebody who just specializes in that area, can really help you create all of the documents you need, not just the trust itself, but things like powers of attorney for both financial and healthcare reasons. Make sure they help you title things like your home and your accounts in the name of the trust correctly. There's also how you want to title beneficiaries, right? So for things like your IRA accounts or your 401k accounts over time, believe it or not, there's a certain kind of dynamic where it can be harmful to title those the trust as beneficiaries in those accounts, but it absolutely should be the beneficiary in certain situations. So this kind of segment, again, for our time is to let you know what a trust is, what a will is. If you have any assets in general, a trust is usually the way to go. And you need to see a qualified estate planning attorney to make sure that your estate plan is well in order. And if you don't have that qualified relationship, here at Epstein White, we work very closely with some great attorneys. We'll be happy to help you with your estate planning process.
Well, that's all the financial fun we have for you this week. We covered a lot: wills and trusts, sequence of returns, 5-star Morningstar funds.
We really did. We had a fantastic show, Dave. I really think that we did. We hope that you agree. And please make sure to tune in every single week, same time, same channel, for Retire Right with Epstein White, because each and every week our mission is to help you do just that, retire right.